Hi, hello, hey, and welcome to my tent, a place to hear life experiences, different opinions, a range of journeys, and a viewpoint different than our own. A place to challenge our own thoughts, a space to learn a little bit, and I promise some fun along the way. I believe we're better when we let a range of people into our tents, so welcome to mine. Did you know that our health is encompassed by way more than just food and fitness? Did you know I'm a health coach? What is a health coach? I can tell you. I work with individuals and groups to look at all aspects of life that help make us truly well. I have structured programs to help you create realistic, challenging but achievable, and long-term transformations that span long past our time working together. I help you take a multifaceted approach to your health, ranging from food, fitness, relationships, work-life balance, financial health, gratitude and joy, creativity, career, and more. If you are looking to make a health transformation, visit my website in the show notes or email me, sarah@sarahjohnstonwellness.com. Cheers to good health. I am so excited to virtually meet you. Hello, and have you on an episode today. And I'm so glad that we get to connect because I feel like I have a husband, but I'm not a husband and I am not a male. So I think that your perspective is going to be really interesting for me personally to hear. So selfish reasons, I'm glad that we're chatting, but for listeners as well, I'm just pretty fascinated at what you're doing with the work, specifically around men and how you're structuring that. But I'd also, just to kick things off, love to turn it to you and have you give a little intro of who you are and where you're located. And from there, we can get into all of the goodies that you're doing with your work.
Okay. My name is Brent Dowlen, and I'm the Fallible Man. I'm a men's coach and podcaster going on 3 years. We have the Fallible Man podcast, and we actually just launched a secondary show called Read Me a Story, Dad, which is a kind of a passion project thing. It's just men reading stories to children that I'm very excited about. We just kicked that off August 1st. We're just trying to serve families that, there are so many busy families these days where you either don't have both parents or both parents have to work. And I think sitting down and reading to children is really important. So we just launched that. And we're very excited about that. That's a collaborative effort. I'm working with a lot of the guys I've met on the podcast. So I am in Central Washington State, right kind of in the middle of the map.
Yeah.
This little area known as Quincy. It's agriculture and IT. We're kind of the Silicon Valley of the Northwest.
Nice.
We have 9 major data centers in my town. It's all agriculture and data centers.
Oh my gosh. Like farms, like cloud farms?
Like the big giant server farms. Yeah.
Yeah.
9 different companies represented in these massive multi-acre buildings. And that's actually my background. I came out here with the construction and spent 6.5, 7 years building the data centers. And I started working in the data centers. And several years ago, after spending many years in IT, I started doing this show. And so I have 2 daughters. They're 9 and 11. Abby and Henley are just the light of my life. And my amazing wife, Sarah, who's been married and put up with my crap for 22 years.
It's a Sarah thing. It's a Sarah thing.
Right? Sarah is a major part of this. In fact, Sarah does the engineering for my podcast in the background when I'm doing recordings.
Amazing.
And keeps me on my toes. So
yes.
She sends me the messages while I'm recording. Just ask about this. Okay, ask about that.
Hey, I wish one day when this scales out, I will have, I think, more. But that is very key. And I noticed, because in your description, you also said that she's a big part of how you've built your services as well. So she seems to also be integrated with what almost like a joint thing of how you're going out and working with clients and whatnot today. So that's incredible that you're a team effort.
50% owner in all of our businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And we sit down and we talk about where we want to go with things and what we think we need to be doing. And she leaves a lot of the production up to me as far as the actual production, but our conversations either center around our kids or our businesses pretty much at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's how it kind of goes these days. Even when we go on date nights and we're like, we're not going to talk about the kid. We're not going to talk about Ronan. It's like 75% of the conversation still. So
exactly. We all talk about that on the way to the date night, right? In the car. Okay, we're not talking about the girls. We're not talking about work. We're not. What are we else? What are we talking about?
Yeah,
Wow.
it's like, well, what else? How's the weather? Yeah. Oh my gosh, I totally get you there. But so cool that you were in IT and started in that background, and then you've spun off into this, very passionate about it, just from, you can tell via your Instagram and via your profiles and how you talk about it. So I'd love to hear about how the inception of this came to mind, how you started this, and why men in specific. I think there's a huge gap in the market personally for that. So I think it's an incredible thing that you're doing here. But I'd love to hear the starts of this and the why of how this came to light. And you're laughing, so it
Yeah.
must be
Yeah.
good.
Well, this so like everything is a messy start, right? This has his roots in my wife and I used to have a Thursday night dinner with all of our friends, and we'd have 14 to 16 people in our house before we had kids. Just every Thursday night, we had several friends who came into the area and worked from out of the area in town during the construction boom that was going on here. And so we'd have dinner on Thursday night, so that way those friends who were traveling to go home for the weekend could go. And it started with some conversations around listening to our female friends complain about their husbands, complain about their boyfriends. And I kind of became this translator for our friends. Like, I don't understand why my boyfriend does this. I'm like, well, what's going on? Oh, this is what's happening. And they started pushing me. It's like, you should write a book. You need to write a book and translate men for women. And I was like, uh, well, this actually became a regular, like I started hearing this more and more. And I'm stopping count. I have 9 or 10 nieces.
Oh wow. Yeah.
They range from like 29 down to infant,
Big
right?
range. Yeah.
And 2 daughters. I grew up with a lot of women in my family. And I started thinking about, I watched my older nieces struggle with dating. And I also used to be a youth minister. So there's a lot of good, I spent a lot of my life working with teenagers, and I'd see girls with broken hearts, and I see guys be like, I don't know what I did. Right. And all this started piling up in my head. And then, I mean, honestly, as it started to pile on, it's like, okay, I really need to do something. And this may sound weird for some of your listeners, but honestly, like it felt like God was talking to me. It's like,
Hmm.
right, you need to do something about this. And so the fallible man was born out of me losing an argument with God because I didn't want to do it. I knew it was going to be a lot of work. Right. But I started with writing a book, but I didn't want to write the book that I was being asked to write. I don't want to try and tell women how to understand men because
Hmm.
that's long game. I don't think that's very beneficial. I mean, I could write that book. It's not going to help at the magnitude I want to help at. So instead, I started writing a book on how to step up your game as a man, listening to all the complaints I have heard and translating those, being around women my whole life. That and I really didn't want to be accused of mansplaining anything.
Yeah, well, that's where I like am nodding along because you're you're teaching men almost also how to decode the things that you're hearing from nieces in your family, and I'm sure probably also your own wife, like all of these things.
Yeah.
And to me, instead of like a woman reading a book of, it's the onus is on us, you're teaching men also the skills to have successful relationships and successful interactions and show up in the world. So I am very much so aligned to how you rolled that out, at least from my POV.
I started writing this book, right? And I've written like 120 pages.
Hmm.
And so I started looking at self-publishing because I thought, okay, I'm nobody. Nobody's going to read this book. No one's going to publish this book, right? I mean, how many books get submitted every year to publishing houses?
Yeah.
I started looking at self-publishing. It's like, oh, okay. So if I want someone other than Sarah and my mom to read this, I've got to build a following, right? So I did what everybody does, right? I went to Instagram. It's like,
Yeah.
everybody can be Insta famous. That's so easy. Oh, Sarah, I hate Instagram. I hate social media. I can do it. I can do it a lot better than I do.
Yeah.
I don't because that's not where my big audience is.
Where is your big, is it podcasting?
It is.
Yeah.
My podcast has surpassed 11,000 downloads a month at this point.
Amazing. And do you think that is just from your own maybe findings, a male versus female thing, or men more into like listening versus either reading or social?
Men like to Men like something in the background,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're not the biggest multitaskers in the world just because of this difference in the way our brains process things from the way women's brains process things. But we do like to hear stuff in the background and kind of listen to it,
Yeah.
right? And for some men, that's music, and some that's audiobook, some that's podcast. But there is a point where you're like, I don't really want to listen to music right now,
Yep.
right? And audiobooks, depending on the book you're reading, you may have to, if it's fiction, you can kind of ride it along. If it's something more serious than that, you really got to tune in.
Yeah.
With a podcast, you hear keywords and your brain tunes in and out. And so I think that's a lot of it. It's a good platform for a lot of men. I meet a lot of guys who are like, "Oh my goodness, you're a podcaster? Which I listen to podcasts all the time when I'm in the car, whether they're commuting or as part of their job." I listen to meet so many guys who listen to podcasts in their vehicle, whether that's whatever, just going to the store.
My husband all day, headphones in all day, and
Mhm.
he'll do anything with a podcast. And if he's going to take the trash out, even if it takes 5 minutes, headphones in. And that's just, and I love podcasts as well. And I do listen, but I'm glad that you found that that was the venue where you could reach the most people and most effectively. And that download number speaks for itself. So that's incredible.
Well, and that's it, right? I tried Instagram, I tried Facebook, and I suck at all of them, mainly because I don't like consuming that content, right?
Mhm.
I understand, like, I actually understand the logic. I could boost my numbers a lot on my social media. I don't put the effort in because I'm the one doing all the production in the background. It's just more time than I want to put into that medium, right? But it's like I don't really enjoy this medium. So I started going, well, I'm a preacher's kid and I'm a former minister. I've been doing public speaking since I was 11 years old. And so I thought, you know what? Podcast. I love podcasts. I can start a podcast. And that's after a couple of weeks of, yep, I hate social media. The podcast was born, and I turned on a camera when I did it. I was like, hey, I got a video camera. I'll just stick that on YouTube. I won't do much with it. And my YouTube channel isn't real big. Uh, but the audio numbers are great and they get better every month.
Mhm.
You know, watch it go up. And I've just fallen in love with the podcasting community. I meet so many cool people in the podcasting community anyway.
Yeah.
And so 3 years later, we're still on this ride and I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you're climbing numbers in terms of listeners and you don't have to do Instagram, by all means. I mean, the only reason I like Instagram is because I have built my following by not caring.
Mhm.
That's my vibe. I'm a mess and I don't care how I show up. I'm not curated. I take a photo on a whim and it goes up. And I like that because I don't really feel that pressure to curate anything. So I do it, but I've really enjoyed the podcasting aspect of things because it is just such a different venue for people to listen. So with what you're doing now, obviously you're podcasting, and those are going to be episodes, I assume, with guests that come on and talk about different types of things. And then are there solo episodes? How are you structuring content with the podcast?
So I've actually grown in that as I've been doing it. Like I said, we're in our third year. We're getting ready. We're towards the end of season 4. Season 5 will start with 2024. Uh, and so I have actually gone back last November towards the end of season 3. I went from doing 1 episode a week to 2.
Mm,
And so I actually was originally a solo show. And then I started getting guests and I started doing all guest shows. And I actually had one of my first listeners, call me out. He's like, Brent, I like your guests. You're getting some really cool guests. I'm enjoying that aspect. But I started listening to this because I wanted to hear what you had to say about it.
mhm. They miss you. Yeah.
And yeah, that was a feel good moment. I'm like, yay,
You
right?
like me. Yay.
I was like, you
Yes.
want to listen to me? You even know me and you want to listen to me. That's scary. But because I worked with the guy, so I started doing every other episode as a solo or our guest. And I hit a point in November this last year when, you know what? The podcast is growing and I think this will help. And so now I release a interview on Wednesdays and a solo episode on Fridays. But I've also formatted the episodes slightly differently. My interviews an hour and 15 minutes. My solo shows, I try and keep them under 15. Every now and then I creep over. I actually shoot ideally for about 8 to 12 minutes. And it's usually very concise bullet points because I realized I was missing my friend's demographic. I have a friend who's a IT engineer for Microsoft, and he's a no fuss, no muss. He doesn't want his hand held. He's highly intelligent. He just wants the data and on. And he doesn't listen to the show for much more than 8 to 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you wrote on your page as well, especially as you're encouraging men to take better care of themselves and better themselves, that we're all really busy. We are all very busy people. Our attention spans are next to nothing with the world that we live in. And so, how do you talk about some of those aspects of it is possible to take care of yourself, to better yourself, to do personal and self development despite a busy schedule? I know an 8 to 10 minute episode is clutch, but what are some other ways that you're talking about that? Because I think a lot of people sometimes get overwhelmed with wanting to change, and they think that it has to be this 4 hour a day expedition and all of these things. But in reality, these small changes do add up to very big impacts. I talk about that frequently, both here and whoever will listen to me hears about it. But how are you talking about men in particular bettering themselves despite the busy culture and climate that we all live in?
Well, it's because of that we actually go a very different way.
Mm,
So I'm also a certified personal trainer,
mhm.
and I have a background. I finally got my certification because my wife was like, just get your paperwork so you can charge for this.
Yeah.
Because I'm the guy who people come to who knew was like, oh, Brent knows I'll get help with this. Right. And I realized a long time ago that big changes don't work.
Mhm.
That's why people failed New Year's resolutions, right? 3 months, 93% of New Year's resolutions are gone. 47% in the first 2 weeks. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves.
Yeah.
It cracks me up. And it's because people miss all the micro steps involved in change. So at the Fallible Man, both as a trainer in the gym and at the Fallible Man, we approach things from the concept of incremental growth, right? As a trainer, I watch somebody do a bench press and they're like, man, I'm not getting stronger. I'm like, yes, you are. And they don't see it because the weight on the bar didn't change. I saw it because they did that set faster. They took
Mhm.
less rest between sets, right? They weren't as tired by the last set, right? I'm watching these small changes they can't see. And so I started applying that to everything. When I decided to start trying to take care of myself more, right? I was working a computer job in the IT world and I could eat at my desk, but it's like, you know what? I'm putting on a lot of weight. I need to get moving. Just sitting at a desk all day is killing me. And so I started eating before my lunch break, and then I'd walk around the building at lunch.
Mhm.
We're talking really large buildings here. So there's a long,
Yeah.
big distance.
Yeah.
When I started, my only goal was to go out and just walk around the building for the 30 minutes I had. There was no pacing, there was no anything. It was like, I'm just going to go out and walk. And then the more I did it, it's like, okay, let's see if I can get 3 laps this time. Right. I started nudging up a little more. And then I went from listening to music to, it was like, well, I'm walking. What else can I do? I love music. I'm a music guy, so I love having tunes in. But I was like, you know what? I can listen to an audiobook.
Mhm.
So I started listening to at the time it was financial books because I had a dawning realization how much growth I needed in my financial IQ at the time. And so I started listening to finance books, right? Trying to understand finances better. And all of a sudden, I'm walking 2 miles in 30 minutes while I'm listening to audiobooks. And I'm putting little things in my head. I'm doing something for my body all during my workday. I didn't have to go to the gym afterwards or before. I didn't have to change my schedule. I changed when I eat because I could. I had that flexibility. I know everybody can't do that. But I know a lot of construction workers who kind of eat as they go.
Mhm.
They
Yeah.
knock the bars out of their
That's
pocket.
what, as a mom, that's what I do. So I'm not a construction worker, but as a mom to a 14-month-old.
I have been guilty of eating a quarter pounder on scaffolding while I was installing insulation before.
I would love to have seen that, I will say.
Both really gross and kind of cool from a guy's perspective.
Oh gosh. Yes. Yes. I get that. I get that. But that's an important concept because I was even talking about this other day with a friend. I have no time. I'm like, how much time do you spend doom scrolling on Instagram? How much time are you spending on TikTok? How many episodes of that show did you watch? Of course, I am a huge believer in sitting down and taking some R&R if that means watching a show, but could you have maybe done one episode less? There's 30 minutes. And it doesn't have to be this huge thing. And if 30 minutes overwhelms you, try 10, try 5, then 10, then 15.
I just read 5 pages. 5 pages.
Yes. Yes. And a lot of times, what I also say to myself, because I'm also NASM, I am a trainer and I used to teach. And then when I had my son, it's taken a back seat because I work corporate and do a million other things. But people would come to me. And my rule for myself, even too, is if you're struggling to get started, give yourself the 5-minute rule. Start, put on a timer. If after 5 minutes, you're still really not feeling it, give yourself permission to let go, to turn it off.
Mhm.
9 times out of 10, after 5 minutes, I'm good to go. It's starting that is the hardest part a lot of these times. And I'm like, oh, that wasn't so bad. I'll keep going. I'll keep doing whatever.
You get 5 pages into a book, you're like, oh, I'm into this. I'm enjoying this, right? And all of a sudden you're 10 pages in.
Yep.
But the other end of that, besides incremental steps, right? I always, pick one small thing. That's one of our biggest things. Pick one small thing. And it doesn't have to be earth shattering. Pick one small thing today. Drink 8 ounces more water. Get up 10 minutes earlier, right? Pick one thing today. Nothing else matters. Don't worry about fixing anything else. Just pick that one thing today. I'm going to get up 10 minutes earlier so I'm not as rushed going out the door, right? I'm going to drink 8 more ounces of water today just because I know I need to hydrate more. On the flip side of that, we get into discipline. And this is where I get more aggressive with it with the guys is, okay, you can do that incremental thing and you need to. That's how you actually make real progress. However, this is where we start to apply discipline. And we talk about the doom scrolling on Instagram. I love that term for it because
Yeah.
I have all my social media apps in a folder on my phone that's labeled time suck as one final reminder as I'm jumping onto those apps not to stay there, right? But this is where the discipline comes in because you have to decide what you want in your life. The problem is we can't have it all. And we're in a culture right now that says, oh, yeah, I get everything. Okay, maybe you can accomplish it all over the course of your lifetime, but you can't accomplish it all now, right now. So you have to start deciding what your priority is and rearranging your schedule and reprioritizing your schedule with a priority list of, okay, what's important today? Today, spending time with my wife and kids is important to me. Making sure I'm at work on time. I need to get in some exercise. When am I going to do that? Well, did you ever watch How the Grinch Stole Christmas with Jim Carrey?
Yes.
Right, and she goes and invites him to the big Christmas celebration, and he's going through his calendar. I'm booked. What am I supposed to do? Well, if I move the self-loathing to 8, and
Yeah.
we have to do that with our schedules because we pride ourselves. Society has moved to where we pride ourselves on being busy, not being productive, being busy. Somehow being busy makes us important. And I don't know how we got in this idea.
Yeah.
But I promise you, if you document your schedule for me for a day, I can find time to fit in whatever you're looking for.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
going to give something up for it, but you're going to get something for it. Right. So I may have to go, hey, I'm not going to scroll on Instagram. I know so many parents who go in the bathroom and scroll social media while they're on the can because they're looking for that quiet time. And I'll be the first to admit I've done it. But
If
right.
someone says they haven't, they're lying. But yes, that is very true.
How much longer are you in the bathroom because of that?
Right. Right.
You have to decide what's important to me at this point in my life. What goals am I trying to get to? And then you have to prune your schedule and make some sacrifices to get to those places because the incremental growth, right? Little steps aren't going to help. People often underestimate how much time it takes to change.
Mm-hmm.
I just actually combined 2 weeks of my coaching sessions into a book because I had a 2 week training sessions of just focusing on how to actually successfully implement change in your life, because there's so much involved in making successful steps that people don't think about that they have to do,
Hmm.
right? Most people fail because they don't actually ever set themselves up to succeed at change because they underestimate what's involved. So for guys and gals who are so busy, you have to decide what you want first. The incremental steps, that's key for delivering upon it. But you have to decide what's important. What do you actually want? You can't have it all at the same time. You may get all of it eventually, but you can't have it all at the same time.
Long term. Yeah. Yeah. So the discipline in the short term and the small impacts, because I see this frequently within industries that I work in, is people don't also want something that's going to be implemented forever. They're like, what can I do in 2 weeks to fix this? And then I never have to do anything again. So, do you see people that come to you that sort of want the short term quick fix? And is that then leaning more into the discipline piece or the short term piece? How would you talk someone through? I only want to do this for 2 weeks, period.
I blow it out of the water from the
Yeah.
start.
Yeah. Fair,
I don't work in anything smaller than 6 week chunks.
fair. Yeah.
Uh, you just there's no such thing as 3 minute abs. That is one of the biggest scams in America.
I
Right?
wish. Yeah. Yeah. But
I wish if 3 minute abs were a real thing, we'd all have six packs.
yeah.
I'll give up 3 minutes a day for a six pack. Yeah, sign me up. Right? We'd all have six packs. We'd all look like Greek gods and goddesses statues, like all those beautiful sculpt. We'd all have those perfect bodies at 3 minutes a day, because all of us will give up something for that, for 3 minutes a day. But that doesn't exist. We live in a microwave society, right? Used to, you had to heat a TV dinner in the oven for 25 minutes. I love getting like pot pies and stuff and looking at the time, or old like
The
corn
stove
dog,
first. Yeah.
right? You look at them, it's like 25 minutes, preheat the oven, 25 minutes. And it's like microwave, 1 minute. Is it as healthy? Does it taste as good? Corn dogs are way better cooked in the oven for 20 minutes than they are in the microwave for a minute.
Yep.
It's then you get the crispy, right? It's way better. Not good for you, but way better to cook them that way. They taste better.
Yeah.
No, we want it in a minute. A minute's easy. We could do a minute. And so I have met so many people who are like, oh, can you tell me how to do this in 2 weeks? Like, no, I can't, because I won't lie to you. I'm not interested in your money enough to lie to you. That doesn't work for me.
It's not setting you up for success. That's not the way that you build these long term habits. And you predominantly work with men. Um, and within that, I'd love to also hear your perspective on how men have changed and how they've evolved. If you want to bring fatherhood also into that picture, because I know you're a father yourself, I'm sure many of your clients are also dads as well. How have you seen men in particular through generations evolve and show up for things that you do with them on a daily basis?
I'm actually a huge student of history, so I have to
Mm.
weigh this out because I can go off on this one for a long time.
That's totally fine. I feel like if it's your passion, you go, you do it.
Well, it's I'm big into history and context, right? Growing up a minister's kid, my dad preached for 47 years. And I'm, like I said, I'm a former youth minister. And one of the biggest things I do when I was teaching kids is teach context and social norms, because that frames things differently when you're studying stuff, right? And so for me, my grandfather was also a history teacher. Uh, History plays a big role because you have to set back sometimes to see a bigger picture of what's happening. So we see men coming home from war post World War II, right? This is where it actually really started to change in the world of men, because World War II is horrible, right? It's horrific. And it was long. And so women had to change up a lot in their lives to adapt to their men being gone for so long, right? So women started working more in the commercial workspace industries, in production. They also started having to do things around the house that at that point were considered traditionally male roles, right? Mow the lawn, fix things, right? Traditionally male roles. But they had to adapt, right? Because all the men were off at war. And so men came back from war and their wives were much more independent when they left, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But all of a sudden, men are going like, where do I fit? Because she's now gotten into a routine, right? I mow on Tuesdays and I do this, right? I have a routine. And women get into good routines and they don't like it when you mess that up. Right. So now it's, oh, what are you doing? Oh, I'm going to go mow the lawn. No, I'm doing that this afternoon. Okay. Because men came back from years of conflict and they didn't want more conflict. The last thing they wanted to do was come home from war and all this conflict and all this turmoil and have more of it. So a lot of the men who came home from World War II just went, you know what? That's fine. You've got a routine you've taken care of. Obviously, I can see you taking care of things. And we don't want a conflict. We're tired of conflict. And so men started adapting their roles with women taking more of a leadership role and more of a, like I said, quote unquote, masculine role in the relationship. Right now, we have a generation having kids that this is the new dynamic. And so those kids grew up seeing dad back down to mom because dad's just tired. Dad has seen things and had to do things he never thought he would ever have to do. And there's a reason dad is like that because God knows that was horrible.
Yeah.
Right. But now sons and daughters are seeing, oh, this is the new dynamic. This is the new norm. Right. And we've already gone through one wave of feminism at that point where women got the vote. And that was a great moment. One of the things that gets glossed over in that moment is actually over 100,000 men got the right to vote that day too.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of the men in the US who could not vote and got that same right to vote at the same time. We talk about women getting the vote. We miss there were a lot of men who got the vote then too. It wasn't just women that get to vote. There were a lot of men who couldn't. So now we've changed. We're moving into the second wave of feminism. And when I say feminism, I'm not saying that in a negative light. Okay. Anything taken to an extreme. I'm a girl dad.
Yeah.
Tell me my daughters can't do something, I'm going to punch you in the face.
There was a video, I was on your Instagram, they were painting your toenails because they, because they wanted to practice. Yes.
Right. Total girl dad, tea parties and all, man, But, right, with anything, you can take something too far, right? You can take masculinity too far. You can take feminism too far. With any idea, you can always go to an extreme. And so we're in the second wave of feminism because now women are going, well, hey, we can do this. We can do this. Great. Life has changed. You adapted to a situation, but now it's become a new norm. Is it bad? Not necessarily, but now men are starting to kind of search for us like, well, where do we fit in this new picture?
Mm-hmm.
And women are going, hey, we could do this. Why do we need guys around? Right? We're strong. We're powerful now. That's great. You're strong and powerful. Men don't have to be weak for you to be strong and powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Don't have to be weak for men to be strong and powerful. Right? Sexes can be strong and powerful together, and it's amazing. But we're moving forward, and all of a sudden we've got generations who have gone, okay, this dynamic has shifted. And feminism has moved in this direction of a more extreme step forward as women pursue the workplace more, right? Like I said, not necessarily a horrible thing, but is changing this dynamic because now men traditionally are providers, protectors, and presiders, right? They made these big decisions in the family, they made the money, and they protected the family. Well, we're not at war. I mean, we've been at war for a lot of years, but
right, yeah,
home, we're not at war. These days, you can't tell the difference sometimes.
True.
But now, right, that I don't need to protect my family. I'm not worried about a bear coming into my house. I'm not worried about my kids getting snatched by mountain lions unless I live way up in the hills. And so I don't need to physically protect them as much. I should be able to, but I don't necessarily need to. My wife can go out and get a job equivalent to me. So do I have to provide as much? Should I be able to? Yes. Do I have to be the breadwinner? Not necessarily. Right. And now we've switched as women have become more and more independent to it's like, well, why should you make the decisions? And it's one of the things I tell women, it's like, my wife honors me and respects me and lays the big decisions at my feet. I hear everything she has to say about it. It's a decision we make together. But the final decision is usually on my shoulders. And it's because she honors me with that,
Mhm.
as she has to. It's because she chooses to lay that at my feet and give me that power in our relationship. Right. In return, I also make sure I hear everything she has to say about it and take in consideration the betterment of our family and everything else. It's a us decision, but it's an act of service and love. It's not a she's super submissive and only does, it
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
feel like that. Right. So we've gone generations forward, and through this movement, it gets a little more and a little more and a little more. And now we move into the age where we're talking about toxic masculinity now, right?
Mhm.
I've actually been glad to see that slowly dying out. That phrase doesn't get aired as much as it did 3 years ago. But what people are calling toxic masculinity, I would turn around and call the lack of masculinity.
Interesting.
How stripped men of their natural role that they lived in for thousands of years, but you didn't give them a new purpose. You didn't give them a new outlet. Men are more aggressive by nature, right? Well, we haven't given them a healthy place for that to go. We haven't said, this is your role. This is your definition. This is who you are. We have taken away everything that gave their life purpose without saying, well, here's how you find a new purpose, right? You see these videos on Instagram that kills me with men randomly running up and sucker punching somebody. That's not toxic masculinity. That's a little boy who has no control or discipline and doesn't know what to do with the emotions and feelings inside of himself.
Mhm.
Aggression that all boys have to learn to deal with. And it's not a toxic trait that they're aggressive. When we're at a time of conflict, you're really grateful that exists because you need that to survive. But we all have to learn to deal with that when we're not at a time of conflict.
Mhm. Yeah.
You have to find a healthy outlet.
Yeah. And do you feel that so that the toxic masculinity piece, almost the disconnect of the world we live in is like they're almost still feeling like they're 1,000 years prior. Women have developed this whole aura about all of us, which is super cool and I love. And that the men maybe are just in that disconnect of like, I don't know where I stand. Is that what you're sort of feeling?
We've told them everything. So I'm actually both horrified and excited because I like data points. I'm big into
Yeah.
data points.
Yeah.
We're about to experience something that's never happened in the history of mankind. We have spent the last 20 years telling little boys that everything they instinctually feel, think, and are inclined to is wrong and bad. For 20 years in the public school systems and in society, we have said, no, don't be aggressive. No, don't be competitive. No, you don't need to protect her. She can protect herself. No, you're not in charge. Anybody can be in charge, right? We have said all these things that are natural inclination for young boys growing and developing testosterone and aging up, right? As their bodies change and those hormones hit. We said, no, 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 no. That's bad. Aggression is bad. Being mean is bad. Being tough is bad. Everything about you is bad. What does that do to a kid? What does it do to a generation to have everything that naturally happens to them, right? It's part of who they are. You're not going to breed that out of boys.
Hmm.
But everything you've ever known or thought or felt about yourself is bad. And now we've got generations of boys who are coming into their own with no self esteem, no guidance, and no healthy way of managing these things because we didn't let them deal with it at all.
Yeah. It's the so what do you do with this now? That
Right.
seems to be maybe we're not teaching them, we're just telling them they're bad. But instead of just it's stopping there. And we're not necessarily telling them here are the tools and here are the things and here are the ways that you can make this work for you. Instead of this is bad, it's working against you. Don't do it.
Right. We've said, hey, you feel aggressive. You have this aggressive tendency, and that's bad. And there it stopped. Instead of saying, you know what? you're going to have some aggressive nature, and that's okay. That's part of who you are. At this point in our life, we have to control how we let that out, though, because we're in a civilized society
Yeah.
where we don't need you to want to be angry or mad at everybody or to vent that physical hostility.
Kill a bear. Yeah. Like,
Right? Yeah.
yeah.
These very instinctual and necessary things in the development of the human race, instead of saying, hey, this is how we handle it now. This is how you do. Let's get you involved in sports where you can be aggressive. That's okay. Let's get you involved in martial arts where you learn discipline for that aggression and you're taught to control your emotions, right? One of the biggest complaints I hear from women is men are not in touch with their emotions. No, we process them differently.
Yeah.
And we aren't as prone to let them dictate our reaction to things.
Hmm.
That's not a bad thing. If men just emotionally reacted to half their feelings, life would be a lot messier. It
Right.
really
Right. And do you think there's
quickly.
a disconnect between the way that men approach mental health, though, and the way that women approach, because I feel like all of my friends, my female friends, were like, therapists, we love our therapists. And it seems like that's really hard for men to get to that point. Is there a disconnect that you see with how you work through some of
Oh,
these
absolutely.
things? Yeah. And how do you help people maybe embrace that side? Because I think the world would be a better place if everyone had a therapist. I just think that things would go much better. But I do see it that all of my girlfriends were like, we love our therapist. And guys can be very closed to that mental health conversation. So how do you?
Well, let me give you an example because the mental health standards for dealing with mental health issues, uh, 79% of men statistically have said they've felt like they've had mental health issues that could have been diagnosed at some point in their life and they've had to deal with that. 79% of men, that's huge. That's a huge
Mhm,
number, right? But the modern approach to mental health was developed with women in mind.
mhm,
Standards of practices. Women talk about their emotions. They talk about it openly and they want to discuss it, they want to explore it. That's not the way men are hardwired. And so let me give you a practical example. So I joined the military when I was 20.
mhm,
I joined with one goal in mind, that was special forces. I didn't have in fact, I did just the opposite of what I tell every young person I ever talk to. I went in without any guarantee because it was special forces or bust for me. That was it. I wasn't leaving myself an outlet in case it didn't work out.
yeah,
So I got into special forces and that didn't last long, injured, blah, 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 blah. Short story, ended badly. But while I was there, I did get injured. I actually started having some mental health issues of my own
mhm,
because I felt like I was stuck. I ended up actually attempting suicide, and which is still debatable in my head, but they sent me to a psychiatrist, right? I actually got more hostile and had to be removed from the psychiatrist's office. I threatened to kill him
mhm,
because he approached me with this, well, let's talk about your feelings. He also had a wall full of certifications behind me that I was supposed behind him. So I had to look at how smart he was.
mhm,
So he's automatically confrontational from a male perspective. He's automatically confrontational because he set up his office. So I will know he is smarter and better than me. And then he approaches me with this, well, let's talk about how we feel, Airman Dowlen. I'm like, no, let's not.
yeah,
Well, how do you feel? I feel like taking a bat to your head at the moment. Well, that's just, yeah, I mean, it digressed so quickly.
yeah,
And I was escorted out of there, never saw him again. But men don't connect like that. That's not how we process things. Men process things in a less, more physical way.
mhm,
We need an outlet to process that, right? That's why the gym is so much popular for a lot of guys than it is for women, even.
mhm,
We're told we can only be so aggressive. Well, we can go to the gym and slam the weights around and pump iron. That actually feeds the same need as going out and getting in a fight, right? It lets us get the physical because it translates to a physical energy.
mhm,
But for men to actually process things, we need to start aligning and seeing a direction. We don't want to talk about it. We want to see a light at the end of the tunnel.
mhm,
We want to see a clear path to step through it. We don't want to wallow in it. We don't want to wail in it. We don't want to play with it. We don't want to talk about it if we don't have to. We need a positive direction to move forward in, because once we have that, then we can go, you know what? We're moving, we're moving forward. And I can now acknowledge, yes, I was stuck. This was bad, but it's not dictating my life now. It's not in charge because I have a direction.
Yeah.
And therapy doesn't necessarily approach you that way. They want you to process it. And I think therapists, and I've talked to a lot of therapists on my show, they have good intentions, but the way they're trained isn't trained in the direction that men want to process something. It's more connective, interpersonal. Let's talk about our feelings. Let's explore our emotions. Why do we feel that? We don't care.
Yeah.
We don't care why we feel that way. We know we have a feeling. We know we don't like that feeling, and we have to get it into control. But for us to process that, we have to see past that to the next step and solution to get us out of that hole. And that's just not how modern therapy is set up.
Yeah. Not to mention, I feel like the medical system's just broken in general, which is that's a whole, I feel like, other hour long
A whole
conversation
nother show.
that we could have. But that does make sense. And I'm sure there are some men that maybe do align to the talk about your feelings piece, but is that how you also connect the small incremental pieces and the discipline for the greater vision? Is that all then tied together with how you work with your clients?
I do. I like to walk, right? I believe everybody individually has design. You
Uh-huh.
have talents, perspectives, gifts. And I don't do this whole we're all special snowflakes thing, but you have a unique set of gifts, talents, and perspectives because you're the only one who lived your life.
Mhm.
You perceived an experience. You may have the same exact experience, right? Uh, I lost my dad 2 years ago to a long term health battle. My friend lost his dad last year. We both lost our dads in 2 years. One of my best friends for going on 19 years, right? We both had very different experiences with that. The way I dealt with it and processed it, the way he dealt with it and processed it, very, very different experiences, right? Because we're different people. We can have the same exact experience, but we don't see it from the same place,
Yeah.
right? We are a collection of all of our experiences, our perspectives, our teachings, and then we have those gifts and talents that come naturally towards us and those personality inclinations, right? So I believe everybody has something very unique to offer the world that is just a natural progression for them. So if I can help men see this, you have this bigger purpose. Yeah, great. You're taking care of your family. You've got a good job. But that's what happened is I hit 40 and I went, and it wasn't a midlife crisis. I tell people I hit 40. It was actually a wake up call for my financial IQ that actually kicked all this off as
Yeah.
far as moving forward. But because I realized how much I didn't know at 40, right? I needed to know more because I wasn't managing my finances the way I should because I didn't know, right? And I didn't know that I didn't know. But I found once you start to align men with everybody has a bigger purpose, right? I can look back at my life with great hindsight because, right, hindsight gives us a lot of clarity. 43 years old, I can look back at my life and I can tell you every career path, every job, every role, I always end up in a leadership role,
Mhm.
always. And on top of that, I always end up in a teacher role. I every job I've ever had, I become the trainer every time.
Probably maybe not to your
Huh?
delight every time, maybe, but
No, yeah, yeah, not always to my delight, but yeah, that's right. It doesn't matter what career path, whether I was a youth minister, when I was in the military, when I was in construction, when I was in IT, I always end up the trainer because my natural gifts and talents and what I'm passionate about is helping other people grow and excel, right? I have several people I taught in my last job, and I take huge delight in seeing their success, their professional success, because I started with them when they knew nothing about what we did and I trained them. I train them up and I help nurture them as their career. And I've been able to watch some of them go on to just great career success. And I love that. That makes me feel whole, like I did something worthwhile in my life. Right. So when we start to find that purpose in our life, that gift that just tunes us in with everything we've ever experienced and all of our natural inclinations, you can start to line everything behind it. Those feelings that you are going to have, for any men listening, you're going to have them, right? You're going to have feelings. We have feelings. We just process them differently than
Right.
a woman does. And women definitely process things a lot different. This is why we have the whole men are from Mars, women are from Venus. This is where our communication issues come in.
And it's interesting in a marriage. I mean, my husband and I we're very polar opposite in a lot of different ways. We did our like Myers-Briggs before we got married, dead opposite. There's not one overlap, but it and the what you were talking about with grief, my dad died a couple years ago, and I was finding frustration with my family because it didn't seem like they were as sad about certain things or as affected. And my therapist actually gave me this analogy that like she's like, everyone's sitting in a car and you get T-boned by a truck. Every
Mhm.
person's going to feel the impact differently. The driver versus the person in the trunk versus the person in the passenger seat. Everyone's going to feel that very differently depending on where they're sitting. So you can't expect everyone to have these same exact paths of grief or processing or handling things because they weren't sitting where you were sitting and they never have been and they never will be. And I was like, oh my gosh. And that even within a marriage I apply to where I'm like, why aren't you as angry about this? Or why aren't you feeling like this? And my husband's like, just because I don't feel like that. So it's been really interesting in a marriage for a person who is very different than I am to experience some of these things. And even just listening to this conversation, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I feel like I have takeaways that I can approach now with him because we are different people. I can't expect him to be me because I am the only me.
That's actually a really great analogy. I've never heard that.
Yeah.
I'm going to use that. That's a really good analogy.
It's cool, right? And that was the one that clicked with me where I was like, why doesn't my brother seem to be as agitated about this? Because he was in the trunk and I was in the passenger seat. Like that. I'm like, oh wow, mind
Yeah.
blown.
Add that, right? You got the perspective, and then
Yeah.
you have to separate men and women think differently, right?
Yeah.
Brains actually process things very differently. There was a book written several years ago. I can't call the author off the top of my head. And it's called Men Are Waffles, Women Are Spaghetti. Right? It's a great title, right?
Amazing.
But it is actually probably the best explanation. I've used it for years for the difference in the way men and women process information. Men are you can also liken men to like the old school tape machines you see in movies where like the robot arm grabs that one tape, puts it in. Oh, wait, we need a different. That comes out, put it back, grab this tape, put it in. This is how men's brains are actually designed to process information.
Hmm.
We separate everything. And so that's why we get lost in conversations with women a lot of times. Because a woman is her brain processes almost like a plate of spaghetti. You try and grab that noodle on one side, as she follows that thought, it's going to touch different feelings, thoughts, histories, memories all the way through that plate. And it makes perfect sense in the way your brain processes because you aren't just processing facts, you are processing the emotion and remembering and re experiencing that emotion as you go through those different phases and as you follow that thought. Men aren't. Men are going, wait, we're just talking about what cat food we're getting for the cat tonight.
We need to put that back and take it. It's funny because my husband will be like, wait, how did we get here? Where,
Right.
where did this? Because the way that my brain works is there's 75 different computer tabs open and they're all functioning at the same time. And that is now like also brought into the parenting journey. And I know that you touch and talk about father involvement as well and the importance of father. And my son's almost 14 months, so we've only been at this for a little bit, but I'd like to hear your perspective too on the involvement of the fatherhood journey and also bringing in your experience as well, since you are a dad of two gals.
Both parents are so important in raising a child. It's unreal. And
Hmm.
I really am bothered by this fact that so many people want to go, we can do it on our own. Men are not well off to raise a child on their own any more than a woman is well off to raise a child on her own. It's not a lack of intelligence, it's not a lack of skills or capabilities. It's two sides of the same coin. right? Everybody brings a piece to the table. And in raising children, a woman brings something very unique that a man cannot clone. And vice versa. Men bring something that women cannot do, no matter what they try.
Mhm.
And so I see people, it's like, oh, I don't point fingers or blame as far as single parenting. It's rough. I
Mhm.
have in-laws who are in that. I have in-laws that are stuck in co-parenting, who are some of the closest people to me, right? My brother-in-law and his ex-wife are split, and they're trying to parent together in two households. And there is something that it wasn't made to work that way,
Mhm.
right? For a well-rounded, healthy child, it's not made to work that way. My wife brings something to our children that I can never do, right? Fathers are getting more involved. I'm actually really excited because you're seeing a resurgence in the difference in how parenting looks for a father.
Mhm.
For a long time, right? If we go back a generation or two, my dad was really involved with our lives. My grandfather was fairly involved in his children's lives. His dad was not, right? We start to see this. My grandfather was World War II generation. Uh, so you start to see this where men are actually becoming more involved in parenting, which I'm so excited about. I'm so excited to see that movement because men are bringing something that kids had to key in on before
Yeah.
because they're taking a more proactive step into it. So I'm very excited about that, right? With all the changes going on in the world, I'm really excited seeing men take on more responsibility and see that, you know what, we need to put more into our parenting. We don't, it's not enough to go make a paycheck. And we still have a lot of dads doing that, but it's not enough. We all want to be better than the generation before us, right? We all look at our parents and go, oh, well, if they had only done this, stop the blame game. They did the best they could.
Learn. Yeah, learn from it. Yep.
They learn from their parents learn from their parents, you learn from your parents, and you're going to make some tweaks. And guess what? Your kids are going to learn from you, and they're going to make some tweaks too. It's
Mhm.
just how this game works. But we're seeing, our parents go, you know what? I think this would have made us better. We'll stop trying to blame them for your lot in life. They did the best they could. And you may have got some real lemons. Sorry, that sucks. It's still on you. You get to decide what your life looks like from here.
Mhm.
And your kids are going to have to make that choice. But you can look at that and you can choose to be better about it. Right. I was blessed with incredible parents. My parents were very supportive. They were involved in our lives. My father passed two doors down from the studio I'm in right now. Like him and my mom lived in my guest room the last year of his life. He passed in my guest room.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear.
Oh no, it's fine. He went very peacefully compared to what it could have been.
Yeah.
And so we're very grateful for that. And we got 5 years with him we didn't expect due to a heart condition.
Mhm.
And so I had amazing parents. So for me, it's like, okay, how do I step that up? Because my dad was amazing. I realized at 22 years old, it's like, if I become half the man my father was, I'll have done really well in life. Because as a person, as a father, he was incredible. And he wasn't perfect. He made mistakes, but it's like, how do I improve upon that? But we're moving that direction. We have more and more people going, you know what? Yeah, they did okay. What can I do better? Right. So we got more fathers getting involved. So that's exciting. But like I said, we have the differences. Fathers actually nurse self esteem. Kids' self esteem comes almost entirely from their dads.
Mhm.
Studies have shown us the differences in just what impact people have. Self esteem comes almost entirely from dads. A healthy relationship with your father, you will have a better self esteem going into your life. A negative relationship with your father, you will struggle with value.
Mhm.
70% of a child's choice later in life to be healthy, right? To act, like eat healthy and work out comes from the mom.
Interesting.
Studies have shown that the mom sets the platform for this is what taking care of myself looks like.
And is that a nature nurture or like I feel like this may be a generalization, but women are more attuned to taking care of themselves. And is that maybe what's brought into this?
So I wondered that myself. The psychology of it. I found this statistic the other day. I was reading through some papers on fitness and health, and it's like, wow, that's a really cool study, right? Because I try actively to influence my children in that way, but it's like, okay, Sarah actually is going to have more impact on them than I am on that. Okay,
Yeah.
right? Moms love you regardless. Like a mother's love is one of those pure things in the world, and there's that get into that nurture
Yeah.
for kids. Like I knew my mom was going to love me no matter what I did. I wanted to impress my dad, and my dad absolutely loved me no matter what I did because I made some real bonehead choices in my. But
Yeah.
my mom, it was a foregone conclusion in my head that like I could get arrested for murder and my mom would still love me.
Yeah.
And no question in my mind. Moms have that nurturing, and when you need to feel loved, no one can do that like a mom.
Yeah.
Dads give kids courage. Dads are the one who pick up kids, dust off their knees. Moms do it too, right? I've seen, but like quite literally, a dad picking you up and dusting off your knee and saying, "Get back on the bike. You can do it."
As a kid myself at one point.
The kid is much more likely to try than if the
Mm.
mom does the same thing.
Hmm.
Dads give you courage because if a dad says you can do it, you can do it.
Yeah. And I don't think it's not to say that moms also can't
No, it's not.
provide that, but it is it is back to just the way that we are as humans.
It's
And
not a.
that's
I say things like that. It tends to upset moms. It's not that moms
oh no,
don't
no, no.
have
Yeah.
that, but what we have found, right, through studies is that children believe things are more possible. They're more courageous about things from the influence of a dad. That dad
Hmm.
saying, "You can do this," right? Because
Yeah.
mom always got, and it's because mom always has your back. That's the difference.
Mm.
Because mom always has your back, no matter what. That's in your head. You know, in your core, I could screw up everything. Mom still thinks I'm amazing. She's still my biggest fan.
Yeah.
Dad says, "You can do this," and you want to prove him right. It's just a difference in our psychological impact, uh, and it's crazy, right? Because you can actually see that play out in people's lives. If you go down, and I've read the studies on it, you go down and start asking people who have stronger self-esteem, people who are bigger risk takers and more willing to chase their dreams and things about, generally had a really great relationship with their dad.
Strong dad. And how do you see or view non-blood relations? So I actually grew up, my stepdad married my mom when I was 6 months, but I also had my dad.
Mhm.
So I had this whole dual, I've always had like two moms, two dads, like a million different people, both played an equal importance in my, like both walked me down the aisle, both had a very strong stance. So how do you see that play out maybe in a remarriage or a step parent, and those dynamics? Is it a similar thing?
It can be. I'll say it can be because, right, then you're getting into really complicated areas because
Yeah.
they're going to have the matter of what age was the child when that change happened,
Yeah.
right? Obviously, they're going to have a stronger connection if that transition happened at a much younger age.
I don't remember any different. Yeah.
If stepdad comes into your life as a teenager, you already have some preset dispositions, and then there's the teenage rebellion. You're like, "You're not my dad," right? All that, and that guy may be an amazing father, and he will do his best, but you just aren't going to let him in because he's not my dad, right? So that really is going to spin on what age group and how willing that child was to allow that new influence. I absolutely know so many men. Uh, the very first conference my company put on, we run the Phoenix Men's Conference every year. The very first conference we put on was for role models, father figures, and men who are just stepping up because I didn't want to put something on for dads. I
Yeah.
know so many coaches who have stepped up, so many teachers who have stepped up, so many community leaders, Boy Scout leaders, youth group leaders, who have stepped up and stepped into that father figure role for a child that desperately needed it.
Yeah, because I was going to ask too, like, there are situations where maybe a mother doesn't get remarried or their
Mm,
partner dies, or, not everyone is going to have this clean cut mom, dad, two kids, white picket fence. That's just not the
right.
way of the world anymore. So I'm glad to see that there's also ways that others can foster that positive experience and have an impact on a child that does foster good self-esteem and courage and bravery. Because I'm from the viewpoint that it doesn't have to be your blood related father. It can be another positive male influence in your life.
I know deadbeat dads who
Yep.
aren't worthy of being called dad.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if you ever watched it. I'm a huge fan of the show Last Man Standing with Tim Allen.
I've seen it, but I don't know enough about it.
Oh,
Yeah.
but he has a rant on there where he's like, for all you deadbeat dads out there, show the hell up
Yeah.
because earn that ugly tie, right? You may get this Father's Day ugly tie. Earn that tie. Earn the right to be called dad
Yep.
because anybody, any male who can biologically produce offspring can be a father. It takes something to be a dad.
Yep.
There are men who are blessed with children who never step up and are totally absentee, and they might as well not be there. In
Yeah.
fact, it's actually worse because they are there and they're just neglectful and absentee. I think that's harder than not having them there. And there are men who have never had children. My friend has been a youth minister for 20 plus years. He is single. He doesn't have any children. He's never been married, but he has dedicated 20 plus years of his life to setting an example and working with teenagers. And he's worked with so many kids from homes that were single parent homes or broken homes, whatever you want to say, where they needed that positive male role model.
Yeah.
And that's why my first conference I aimed at, it's like, no, this is for father figures because I know these guys who are stepping up for all the dads who aren't.
Yeah. It's important.
I'm
Yeah.
a big advocate to all men have a responsibility to step up as an example because there are always little eyes watching. You may not know a kid is watching you.
They pick up. They pick up. And my 14-month-old mimics things that I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe you just mimicked. And it's an impressionable age. And I do think that there's a lot of opportunity. I think everyone needs to step up in general, but men especially. Like, there's ways that you can find those people. And if you don't maybe have your biological blood dad around as that, I know that there are people in this world who will step up and be
The,
there.
the way you interact with the checker at your grocery store may change the course of a young kid's life because they see you and you're a something about you stands out to them and they see you interact with them with that person with kindness. Well, guess what? They're going to treat checkers with more kindness for the rest of their life because in that moment, something about you clicked for them and you have no idea that kid saw you.
And you may never, ever interact with them ever again.
Yep.
Yep.
But in that moment, you could have changed their life.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely believe we all have the responsibility. And like I said, I'm not letting women off the hook. I just talk to men generally because really I just don't want to be accused of mansplaining stuff to the women.
No, and you found your niche, and I don't think it would go well if I attempted to market all of these services to men. Of course, I do work with men with training and stuff as well, but I couldn't do what you do for men, and you couldn't do what I do for women.
Right.
And we all have our place in this world, like you said. I feel like my final question, just now that we're on the topic of fatherhood, is what are some of your favorite parts about being a dad?
I love everything about being a dad. Being a dad is this is going to sound weird. So like I said, my dad was a minister, right? I grew up going to a lot of funerals.
Mm,
Uh,
interesting.
yeah. And I grew up going to a lot of funerals with my dad being a minister. And I listen. It's interesting being around people who are mourning
Mm,
and around people who that numbers up. I've been around a lot of people as they were dying. And so I've listened to a lot of people take stock of their lives in the final days or weeks of their lives. And when I was in sixth grade, I decided my biggest aspirations in life, and they still hold true, is I wanted to be the best dad and the best husband I could possibly be. That if I get to the end of this life and the only thing worthwhile that can be said about me is I was a good dad and a good husband, then my life was complete. That was enough for me. That's what I wanted in life. And so the journey of becoming a dad has just been amazing. And I mean, definitely there are times, right, when you want to like choke your kids.
Light your hair on fire. Yes. Yes.
uh, but I have two daughters, and every day, every moment with them is magical to me. I am so excited about every aspect of their life. I love spending time with them. I'm weird because I get so busy, right, that I actually have blocks of time in my schedule that it's just their time.
Yeah.
Specifically, I have one evening a week that is theirs.
It's
Nothing scheduled on my
what's
calendar.
important to you. Dedication. You have decided what's important to you. Yep.
I want them to always know that they hold a priority in my life. And I want to make sure that I don't get so busy that I forget to spend the time I need to with them. And so I've got that blocked in one night a week. It's entirely theirs. I don't help around the house. I don't go do other things unless I'm doing it with them. I don't have people over. I don't answer phone calls. I don't get on social media. It's me and my girls, and it's the best night of my week. And I absolutely like, I hate fishing. I absolutely, I've never understood the appeal of fishing, right? I take my oldest daughter fishing because Abby likes to fish. We took her on a camping trip. My brother and I took her on a camping trip in Colorado, and we took them fishing and camping for the first time. And it was me and my brother and his daughter and my two girls camping in the Rocky Mountains. We took them fishing and camping for the first time. Abby fell in love with it. Henley went a couple times, but Abby fell in love with it. I went to Walmart, and I'm walking up and down the fishing aisle after we got home. And I'm like, I don't understand anything I'm looking at. I have no idea. And this older gentleman kind of looked at me. I said, I'm sorry to bother you, sir, but can I ask you a question? I don't fish. I've never fished. My dad didn't fish. I don't like fishing, but my 9-year-old loves it. And I want to be able to take her fishing. Can you help me? Because I need to buy stuff for that. And I don't even understand what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
And this older gentleman who I don't know how old he was. He could have been a grandfather, but he got the biggest smile on his face as he walked up and down the aisle with me and got me a tackle box and got me a reel for her and all these things I don't understand.
Yeah. You're like, just tell me, I'll buy it.
Yeah. And then he's talking me through tying a hook and everything else. He's like, you will never regret this. I was like, I know. That's why I'm here. I don't like it. I don't want to do it, but I burned down mountains to take her fishing because she loves to go fishing.
Yeah.
And so we go. And I still hate fish after years of it. I still don't like to fish that much. Every now and then I'll throw a line in the water, but I'm really not that into it. But she just loves to go.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
love
so
that.
it's just amazing. They're watching them evolve and become these people that they're going to grow into. And knowing that I have any impact on that. I laugh so hard when I see traits as like, oh yeah, that came from me for sure. That's my side of the family. Oh, that's Sarah's side of the family, right? And I laugh and I cry, and it's like, oh man, I wish she'd gotten that from her mom, not
Yeah.
me.
Yep.
There, it's
Yeah.
just so amazing to be a dad and get to be a part of them becoming the young women they're going to become.
Yeah.
So I have a goal as a dad, and my goal is to be second to Superman. That's my goal, because my goal is to set the bar so stupidly high with the way I live my life that anybody that they bring home is going to be pretty decent. And
Yeah.
it's a really high bar, right? Like I'm about how I talk, how I act, the way I do live my life, the way I take care of myself. I want to set the bar so high in the way that I treat their mother that they have these insanely high expectations, because one day they're going to have kids too.
Yeah. It's all by example. I mean, I have 3 older brothers and 2 dads, so bringing any guy home was extremely fun, but I threw my husband to the wolves. I literally, like, shoved him outside with all of them, and I was like, "See ya, sink or swim," and we'll know pretty quick, but it is a lead by example. And I've just really enjoyed so many of the things that you've talked about. And I think either male or females listening to this will be able to take so much away. Where can people find you? And I'll tag you all in show notes and everything. Is it websites, especially your podcast, anything you want to plug? I am happy to tag and share with everyone here.
Okay. You can find me at thefallibleman.com. If you want to look for my podcast, the easiest place is to go to thefalliblemanpodcast.com.
Okay.
I have its own website, and it's got links to all of the players. It's got YouTube videos embedded. It's got fuller notes. And so I kind of live out of that site for my podcast and all my coaching stuff, everything else, thefallibleman.com. And I'm the Fallible Man pretty much everywhere, social media wise, except for Facebook, because apparently I was bad at that. And I'm at Fallible Man, not the Fallible Man on Facebook, because I had no idea what I was doing setting that up.
We can tag it all correctly, but that is incredible. And cheers to the success that you've had so far with creating this incredible community and work that you're doing on your end. And I've really enjoyed and loved this conversation. I'm excited for everyone to hear it. You'll know where to find Brent. And yeah, thank you so much for being in the tent. Welcome in. You're here for life now, so you're stuck.
I had a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to the Welcome to My Tent podcast. I hope you had as much fun listening as I do recording. I am so happy to have you here, and see you next episode.